Hi, welcome to some pincushion ideas with GourmetQuilter. I'm Susan Clare, the GourmetQuilter, and I've got this program going this year with lots of things happening, and at the moment we're doing 20 different pincushions, so we're doing a different one each day for 20 days, and there's a video for each one with a tutorial, and there's also, if you're interested in getting the pattern, there's a pattern available on GourmetQuilter.com. So if you are getting the pattern, you're going to receive something like this to download and print, with all the instructions, cutting, shapes, if there's shapes involved and things like that. I'm just going to show you how we're going to do it. So this is the pincushion, we're up to pincushion number 9, so we're doing pretty well, we're well into the series. And so this is the little pincushion we're doing this time. It's a very cute little one with a little flower petals on it, and it's sitting nicely. It's got little, it's quite pretty, this one. It's got little bows on the corners and all those sorts of things. So I thought I'd just go through with you how we're going to make this. So to make something like this where you've got these little tied off corners, really it needs to have another cushion inside it. So this is kind of like a cover on the outside. So to do the inside one, we really need to have it so that it's a little bit shaped. So we could just do a circle, but I figured that actually a little octagon is probably even easier than a circle. So what we've got is 2 squares that we're going to make the little inside cushion in, and we just need to trim off those corners. So it's really just a matter of trimming off these corners evenly all round, and I found it just as easy to turn them around and use the same corner each time so that I know what I'm doing. I could have drawn them on and then cut them. I could draw them on and then sew and trim. There's so many different ways in life of doing things, but this is what I've found works well. So I'm just trimming off the 4 corners so that we're left with and I'm using the same measurement from the edges each time. So I've got this nice octagon shape. So what we now need to do, which is pretty much like a circle really, is stitch it around, but we need to leave one of the sides open or a gap in one of the sides. So it's probably good to have a little bit of stitching and then all the way around. So just with our 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'll go ahead and I'll do that, and then I will show you how we're going to do the next bit. So I've gone ahead and I've left myself a little gap. So I have done a little bit of sewing in from each corner there, and otherwise just straight lines around. And I'm just going to turn it out the right way. So normally I would probably clip these corners, but as it's going to be inside, nobody's ever going to see this piece. It doesn't really matter because we're after a very rounded shape anyway. So it just needs turning out the right way now, and filling. Now I'm going to use the crushed walnut shell again to fill this one. I think it just sits quite nicely, but we don't want to make it too full because we're after this forming a little dimple in it, so it's got to have a little bit of room to move when we put something like the shell in. You could just use other fibre or other filling, of course, all a matter of what you like. Finger press that close. So that looks pretty good to me. It's a little bit rounded, which is probably exactly what we want. So now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put some of the walnut shell in. It'll take a reasonable amount, so I'll just go ahead and do this, and I'll show you how much of a gap to leave when I get to that point. So I've gone ahead and I've filled it, but there is a little bit of a gap there. We've probably got about 1/2 inch or so not filled, because as I said, we just need a little bit of movement. You can probably have a little look and just sort of push things around a little bit and make sure you think you can create that little dimple. But I think that's all right. So I'm just going to go ahead now and hand sew this, and this is my kind of hand sewing. Nobody's ever going to see this bit, so it doesn't even have to be particularly beautiful, and I probably shouldn't say that to you, but hand sewing is not my thing. So I'll go ahead and get this done and show you how we make the cover. So I'm doing a nice blue pincushion this time, where I've got the green, I've got this lovely blue print here. So all we need to do with this one here, again it's 2 squares, is stitch really around 3 sides. We really need this the 4th side open so that we can insert this in there. If you leave it in the gap, it simply doesn't squish up very much, so I found the easiest way was to leave that side open. Now this one I will clip the corners because we're just wanting those little corners to come out nicely so that we can do the little scrunchy bit on the corners with the ribbons. So I've already gone ahead and I've stitched my 3 sides, left this side open, I've clipped the corners, so now I just want to turn it out the right way. Make sure those corners come out nice and sharp. And it may well be worth doing a little press of that seam allowance in this time, because we're going to be wanting to hand sew all the way along that side. It's going to be a long way to hand sew. Not really. So I'm just going to press in the 1/4 inch along here so that it's hopefully remembers where it wants to go when it comes to my hand sewing. And this one as well. So that's looking pretty good. Don't really need to do much else except now put this in. So what we're trying to do is put this inside, this octagon shape inside a square. So we want to try and line up some square sides if we can. So this will scrunch a little bit because you can kind of push that in because we left a little bit of space in it. And then we just want to make sure that's sitting reasonably straight with the sides if we can, so that those corners have got plenty of room to move, and it's looking pretty good. So the next thing to do would be to hand stitch across this long edge here, and then we need to start making our little flower. So I'll go ahead and do the hand stitching across here, and then I'll show you how to make the little flower to go on top. So I've gone ahead, I've done my hand stitching along the side there, and so now we've just got a little cushion with floppy corners. But I'll just show you now how to do the little corners. So I've just got a needle and thread here, and I'm just going to do just a few little, so we know where our filling is because we can feel that. So we want to come in fairly close, but we don't want to catch in the insert. So just sort of largish stitches here, I found was the easiest way to do this. And then I'm just going to get rid of the needle and have my thread here, and I'm just going to tie that and pull that up. So it's really just like a gathering stitch that I've put in there, and it just helps get it pulled up in the first place. And then once you've got it pulled up, you can tie these threads around. You can pull them around 2 or 3 times and wrap it and tie them nice and firm, so that there's these little corners ready for us to put a little bit of ribbon on later on. So we can go ahead and get all of those done now, and that all kind of fills back out again. So I'll do those in a minute, but I'll just show you how to get started on this flower as well. So the flower is made up of little separate petals. So in the pattern there's a shape to trace for the petal. So what I've gone and done is I've got my light source here, so a light box or some other form of light source. And I've just traced, so I've got 2 pieces of fabric right sides together, and I'm using 2 different ones, and that's just so that there's a little bit of variation. There's 2 different reds here, but each side, like this, there's one side and one the other. So all it needs is for you to trace this line here, the shape of the petal, and we're stitching on that actual drawn line. So we need to stitch them before we cut them out. So I've actually already stitched some of them here, but I've still got one more to do. So it's just a little curved straight stitch. It's nothing hard about this. So stitching on the line that we've drawn, because that's the actual shape that we want. And then they will need to be cut out and turned and pressed. So there's 5 petals altogether. So what we need to do now is just trim them out. So I'm cutting approximately 1/8 of an inch away from the stitching line, because it's going to be a curved shape and it's not anything that has any a great deal of stress on the seam or anything. That just needs to be turned out the right way now. So just a narrow seam allowance because of the curve will help it sit reasonably well, and sometimes something to help push that through is useful because it's fairly small. And then just run something like the chopstick around the seam to help that seam sit nicely, and then we can just press that, and that's looking pretty good, I think. So there's 5 of those to make, so I'll go ahead and finish cutting out all my petals and turning them so that I can show you how to put it all onto the pincushion. So I've gone ahead and done my little gathers on my corners. I've put the ribbons on most of them. I haven't finished yet. I've got one to show you. The one thing I didn't mention before, but it didn't really matter too much, is that just to make a little pencil mark of where the centre is on each side. So you can do it later. I did mine later. So we can hold a ruler up and just see more or less where things are, and do a little halfway mark in both directions, so that there's just something so that you can see where to put the little buttons for the dimples. It just helps a little bit, because sometimes when you're going through with a needle you need to see where you're going to end up. So to make the little flower, I've got my 5 petals. They've all got a raw edge along this straight edge here, and all we just need to do now is gather them up into a little line, and we can just continue on all onto the same piece of thread, because we're going to gather them into a little circle. So just around about that 1/4 inch seam allowance point, and if you want some of them facing one way and facing the other, this would be the time to make those sort of decisions and put them in that sort of order that you want them. This is such a cute little flower. And one more. And then we're just going to draw those up into a little circle and tie that off so that they're sitting more or less how we want them, and then we'll flatten them out to put them on top of the little pincushion. So you want them to sit, we're not trying to bunch them so tight that they won't sit flat. You want them to be able to sit reasonably flat, but they should all meet in the middle. So I just need to tie that up a little bit firmer now, because I've got to put my button over that whole area there. So that's looking pretty good. We want a little bit of fullness in the petals, a little bit of just a little variety of colour, and I think they are going to look pretty good. So I can tie that off now, and then we can get ready to start putting our buttons on as well. So that's all tied pretty tight. So now I'm going to get a different colour thread, because I'm putting bright orange buttons in the centre of my flower. I can just trim these threads off because we don't need that anymore. And as we've done with some of the other pincushions, when we're sewing all the way through with buttons, a longer needle is a really good idea. So I have a longer needle ready to go here, and I've even got an orange thread in it. So I'm going to sew the button initially just onto the flower, just with a couple of stitches, just to hold it all together, so that it's then ready for us to sew all the way through the pincushion. So it always seems a little bit cumbersome. We need a knot on the end of the thread. I thought I had one, but obviously not enough. It'll sit under the flower, so it won't show anyway, that knot. So we just want to stitch that, as I said, just a couple of stitches just to hold it in place and not get in a tangle. Look at that, you're amazing. So that's on there enough to hold it now. So now we want to stitch all the way through to the other side so that we can sew the other button on the other side. So we're going to go all the way through, and that should come out, hopefully, if we're pretty vertical here and everything's sitting flat, fairly close to the center mark, and it is coming out pretty close on the other side there. And I'm always good at getting in a tangle, and that's going to sit quite nicely there. So what we now have to do is put this button on the other end. Golly. And we want to come back through. And now this time we do want to try and match up where the button is and come through one of the holes in the button. And look at that, we're amazing. There it comes. We don't want that other one to tangle, but we do want it to start pulling in a little bit. So it's a good idea to just squidge this shell around a little bit, and we're just going to have to hold on to this. And it won't matter too much at the moment if it comes loose, because we can always pull it up firm again, because we are going to have to fiddle a bit to make sure this needle comes through in the right place. But it's doing a pretty good job actually. So we just need to go backwards and forwards a few times just to hold it nice and firm. And after you've been through 3 or 4 times, it holds itself pretty much in place. It's just that you have to find the holes in the button. But that's looking pretty good, I think. So we're just about finished now. I think that's sitting quite nicely. That's sitting on the back there. So I'm just going to pop the needle through just the button only at this stage, and tie off. You've probably seen me do this before. We've done these buttons on a couple of the other pincushions. Wrap it around and then just do a little tiny stitch underneath the button that nobody's going to see, and we can tie a knot and trim the thread off. That's that. And not get the thread tangled around these lovely corners. Okay, and then I just pop the needle through and bring it out somewhere else so that we can trim the thread off, and it just sits inside there. So that's the little flower done. I think that's looking really cute. I like the little yellow. So I've got one more ribbon to go on the corner. So we've already tied these with a little bit of thread so that it's a little bit easier, and really we've just got to tie a bow around that, and then I'm suggesting that we just pop a little dab of glue, so just a tacky glue, a fast drying glue, or you may have some other glue, will just hold the knot from coming undone. So tie that on fairly firmly and do a little bow. I'm sure you can do a bow. And then just adjust it a little bit. Make sure that it's reasonably firm. And then I've just got a sort of tacky glue here. It's not anything in particular. Any of the tacky craft glues work quite well. And I'm just going to put a little bit of glue, if I can get any out of the bottle, just on the knot. And it'll dry clear so you won't see it, but that should stop it from coming undone later on when you're using it as a pincushion. And then it just needs the little ribbon ends just trimming off so that everything looks nice and tidy. What fun. And now we've got a little flower pincushion. I think that's really cute. I think that one's really cute. I think they're both quite cute. Little flowers with a little button in them. Great little place to put pincushion pins into. And so that was pincushion number 9. I will see you again with pincushion number 10.